Balthezar, criminal mastermind. He invaded the 9 realms with his ant army and trusty bassoon. He allied with Essam to take over the realms together, as Essam is a scientific genius and would contribute greatly to the war effort. Balthezar met with Essam in 1974, where they then signed a pact to invade the realms together. They came up with a plan to use Balthazar's ants and Essam's inventions to wage war. However, they wouldn't begin their invasion until 1990. Ballbag the Ferret caught wind of the situation and immediately rushed straight to the front lines on his plane. He and Balthezar had been rivals since 1987, as their bands were competing with each other, so now was his chance to settle their score. Balthezar immediately sent a message by shooting down Ballbag's plane. However, this would do little damage as Ballbag owns approximately 120 planes. Ballbag's net worth of $600 billion meant that he could fund supplies and weapons to combat the invasion. He spent his cash ensuring the people in the realms were fed, evacuated from dangerous areas, and safe. Ballbag was not about to let the disrespect slide and fought on the front lines to protect the realms. He assembled his old band, the Fetus Farm, to which they teamed up and fought together, each playing a crucial role. Shoebill, armed with his trusty harmonica, got to work at dismantling the ant army supply lines, meaning that they would be disrupted and lack the equipment needed to wage war. Essam invented a pod for the queen ant to travel across the realms in. Shoebill destroyed it a week into the war. Nigel, the vocalist, took a more head-on approach to the war. He charged into the trenches, consuming the ants, to which they could only retreat in horror. The queen ant was given 1,000 bodyguards and a nuclear bunker deep below the surface because of Nigel. The anteater was immune to the opposing army, so they had to get creative with their defense. They set traps around the realms, like nets and fake ant decoys to distract Nigel. Unfortunately, these traps worked like a charm. One fateful day in 1994, Essam crossed paths with Nigel and Shoebill. A fierce battle occurred with Shoebill and Essam engaging in a music duel, where the two took turns in playing their instruments, and the superior instrumentalist would win. As this occurred, Nigel scranned the ant battalion that was deployed under Essam's command. Essam was victorious. Shoebill and Nigel were taken as prisoners of war and held hostage. They were tortured for information and to convince Ballbag to surrender. Despite his loss in the music duel, Shoebill endured the torture and never told Essam a word. Nigel didn't even know Ballbag's plans, as he was told to just go eat the ants. Hope was dwindling for the realms, and although Ballbag tried his best to fight back, he couldn't do it alone. In 1995, Dave the Dodo had woken from his 10-year slumber. This was bad for Balthezar, as he and Dave had some serious beef in the past. Not only this, but Dave and Ballbag were good friends before the hibernation. Dave was the one who taught Ballbag the banjo. Dave saw the atrocities that Balthezar and Essam were causing, and was not about to let it slide. In the past, Dave had a reputation for wanting all the smoke, particularly in bar fights. He grabbed his shotgun and got to work. Dave took to the front lines, opening fire into clusters of ants. He massacred them, destroyed their plans, and began to hunt for their queen. She was no longer in the bunker, as Nigel was captured and not a threat to her anymore. Ballbag heard the news that Dave had awoken, and they both established a rendezvous on Ballbag's yacht. There they would catch up and plan their next cause of action to fight Balthezar and Essam. At this point in the war, it was looking bleak for the realms, as it was highly likely that Balthazar would win. But he knew Dave could turn this around. The two met, played banjo, caught up, and planned. They decided that Dave would infiltrate Essam's lair to save Nigel and Shoebill, whilst Ballbag fought Balthezar one-on-one during the night of eclipse coming up. In case Shoebill and Nigel were dead, Dave's plan B was to prioritize killing Essam. Meanwhile, Balthazar and Essam were partying. They were banging hookers, doing drugs, and living the life as their war crimes ruined lives in the realms. They left a burning scream of destruction and were confident in their chances of success. Unfortunately for them, however, they did not know that Dave had woken. This is because no ants that met him lived to tell the tale. Whilst the party occurred, Dave was approaching Essam's lair. Balthezar had left the party shortly before Dave's arrival, as Ballbag was making big moves on the front lines, which caught Balthazar's attention. As Ballbag lured Balthazar away, Dave arrived at Essam's lair and began his espionage. He entered the lair, guns blazing, burning it down and brutalizing anyone that got in his way. Dave made his way through the halls. Not a scratch on him. He has some blood on him, but it wasn't his. As soon as Essam learned that Dave was in the base, he immediately fled. He was lucky this time, for if Dave wanted him dead, he would be. The security ants in the lair also left, not wanting the smoke. They left Shoebill and Nigel in their cell, as the ants were in too much of a worry to care about prisoners. The trio emerged from the lair successful, and now the enemy team was scattered. Essam was a WOL. The ant communications were destroyed, and now Nigel was on the loose. Dave sent Shoebill to rendezvous with Ballbag, while he and Nigel hunted down the queen ant. If the queen ant was dead, then the ant army was. Meanwhile, Ballbag was using his remaining 119 planes to enact bombing runs on the ant army bases across the realms. The war was turning around as Ballbag made a triumphant comeback. He ravaged Balthazar's lands and destroyed ant army bases. Ant hills all over the realms were obliterated, and the queen ant was left in fear. As Ballbag was flying away from the latest bombing run, he got a message from Dave. The queen ant was dead. The ant army quickly began to fall, deserting the war and leaving Balthazar with just his bassoon. Ballbag and Shoebill met and shook hands. They were glad to see each other. The war was coming to an end, and they were relieved. Now all that was left to do was either arrest Balthazar or kill him. As Shoebill used his masterful mechanic skills to upgrade Ballbag's jet, Balthazar arrived. Ballbag and Balthazar came face to face for the first time in 8 years since 1987. They had a music duel, much like how Essam and Shoebill had won the year before. Ballbag was declared victor of the music battle, thus ending the war. The realms were saved and Balthazar defeated, while Essam managed to escape alive and is always plotting something. The realms are granted momentary peace for years to come. The realms celebrate and cherish their victory as the remains of the ant army surrender. Balthazar is locked away and Essam is exiled. Future generations are promised peace, freedom, and justice now that Ballbag, Shoebill, Nigel, and Dave have won. They have saved the realms,